There are 4 Pact boons for the Warlock class in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Initially there were 3 when the game first released, but with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, they released 1 more. We're going to talk about that one today. Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm your innkeeper, and today we'll be talking about the Pact of the Talisman for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. I haven't really advertised my Patreon page in the last few videos, so I really should start doing that. So I do have a Patreon. I also have a Discord. I'll link them in the video description. Thank you guys for all the support, all of you who are patrons. I truly appreciate it. It goes a long way to help the channel out. So when Tasha's Cauldron of Everything came out, they released a few more character options. Recently, I did a survey on the community page of my YouTube channel, and I asked what everyone's favorite Pact boon was, and I did, one of those like poll surveys where people just click which one they like, and of all the Pact boons, Pact of the Talisman got the lowest score by far. I mean, it wasn't even close, and I kind of wanted to briefly talk about that at the end of the video, but before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about the Pact itself, what benefits you get, what invocations open up to you when you choose this Pact, and then we'll go into our analysis of it. So how it works, once you choose the Pact of the Talisman, you get like this talisman that you can wear, or you can give it to allies, minions, whatever, and anyone who's wearing the talisman, when they fail an ability check, they can add a d4 to the roll, and then, it can turn into a success if they fail. And they can use this a limited number of times. It's based on your proficiency bonus. And then you can regain them when you finish a long rest, which is kind of weird because most Warlock things happen on a short rest. So whatever, it is what it is. This Pact is generally good for out-of-combat use. It's kind of like a mini guidance or a bardic inspiration. A bonus to skill rolls is almost always welcome, but it doesn't scale as you level. So that's one thing that I think is a hindrance to it, and I think that's why a lot of people don't necessarily care for this one. The D4 stays at a D4 even all the way up to level 20. But despite that, it's still really good. Adding a D4 to a roll, I mean, how many times do you roll and you fail by 1 or 2 points? That D4 can really make a difference. I mean, if you think about it, it's boosting your roll by between 5 and 20%. That's not insignificant if you really think about it. So honestly, this Pact gets overlooked a lot because it is an out-of-combat thing, which, most people, they want to pick benefits that help them in combat. And it really requires certain types of builds in order for it to really shine. Although, in my opinion, you can make it work in combat in very specific builds. For example, if you build a Warlock that works with zombie minions or summoned creatures, then this one can be pretty cool. So for example, if you pick the spell Animate Dead, you can use zombies or whatever other minions and you boost their ability score so that they can grapple foes, especially if you hexed those foes, and most Warlocks are using this spell Hex in order to boost their damage with Eldritch Blast. So if you're already hexing the foes, you can target their strongest stat, either dexterity or strength of the two, because those are the two that are used to escape a grapple. So now you target their strongest stats, so they have to contest against your zombie for a grapple check. The zombie is getting a D4 if they fail their check. Meanwhile, the enemy either has to pick their lower stat of the strength or dex, or they pick their highest stat and they're going to have to roll with disadvantage because of Hex. So it's a nice little combo that you can use. Meanwhile, your zombies are adding a d4 to grapple them, so more than likely you'll be able to control them around the battlefield. You can also use this to boost counterspell or dispel magic rolls. Those use an ability check, and those are pass or fail rolls, so adding that d4 sometimes can be really impactful in certain situations where a counterspell or a dispel magic is integral to the survival of your group. There are tons of applications for this, and it stacks with the likes of Guidance and Bardic Inspiration. Now, a couple of things that you can't use this ability on are initiative rolls and stealth rolls, since the ability requires you to fail the check in order to use it. A failure is basically a roll that doesn't meet or surpass the DC set by the Dungeon Master. Since initiative doesn't really roll against a DC, there's really no chance to fail an initiative roll. And the same thing goes for stealth. I've played with some dungeon masters that say that passive perception is the DC for your stealth roll, but that is not rules as written. And honestly, if a DM is saying that, then take advantage of it and let them do that. And then you'll be able to use your Pact of the Talisman die roll in order to work a stealth check or succeed on a stealth check. But honestly, that's not really how it works, because how is the DC of a stealth roll set by the passive perception of who, right? There's the one creature maybe that you're really trying to hide from, but you're still hiding from everyone else who's on the battlefield, right? So which one is the DC? Do you set it to your allies who have a passive perception of 17? Or do you set it to the enemy's passive perception of 12? Or maybe an NPC that you're helping out whose passive perception is 8? How do you determine which one is the DC of all the people who are able to see you? You can't. By rules, stealth is not a pass or fail. Stealth is not a pass or fail. The DC is not set by passive perception. But if your DM is wanting to do that, that's to your benefit, so by all means take advantage of it. Now, on the other hand, you could use it for a perception roll. So because perception is a roll that is a pass or fail, you are rolling perception against the stealth roll that someone made. So the DC of your perception roll is the stealth roll that someone rolled. So then that sets the DC, the stealth roll sets the DC, then you roll perception to see if you spot the character or not. So you could use it on a perception roll. And that's really the basic ability of the Pact of the Talisman. Pretty simple. Most of the Pact boons are pretty straightforward. Really, it's the invocations that make them shine or fail. And in this case, the same thing happens. There are some really good invocations and some really bad invocations. You get a total of 3 invocations that you can pick from throughout your levels that are specifically tied to the Pact of the Talisman, and you can only take them if you pick the Pact of the Talisman. The first invocation, we're going to do them in alphabetical order. It's Bond of the Talisman. This one requires you to be 12th level to be able to take it, and it requires you to have the Pact of the Talisman feature. So while someone is wearing your talisman, and it has to be someone else, you can use your action to teleport to a space close to them, the next unoccupied space closest to them, provided that you're on the same plane of existence. There's no range limit on that. That's super good. The wearer of the talisman can also do the same thing. They can teleport to you by using an action, and they can do that a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and then they refresh after a long rest. So this is super handy for exploration or even combat. So if you can't get to a place, give your talisman to the wizard's familiar and then teleport to them. This is really handy for getting into locked rooms and that kind of stuff. Or let's say you're surrounded. You can teleport away to safety or teleport whoever has your talisman in to help you deal with the enemies that are in front of you. And again, there is no range limit on this, so you just have to be on the same plane of existence. That is so super good. So you can give it to the barbarian. Now you can have the barbarian teleport to you if you get in trouble. They can get close to you and help defeat whatever enemies are surrounding you or trying to capture you, or vice versa. If you give it to the wizard and you're in the front lines and you're in trouble, you can teleport near the wizard where you're back away from the combat in safety. There are many, many uses for this. Of course, exploration is probably going to be the most prevalent use for this ability, and it's really, really good. Anything with teleportation, I always like a lot. It takes an action, so if you're in combat, that is a little bit of a drawback, but regardless, it is a really good ability, and the fact that you can do it back and forth, so you can have the person that's wearing the talisman teleport to you, or you can teleport yourself to the area where the wearer of the talisman is. So that's really good as well, because it's not just a one-way type of thing. You have some options, which it opens up a little bit more versatility for that ability. The next invocation that you're able to take is Protection of the Talisman. This one requires you to be a 7th level Warlock and have the Pact of the Talisman feature. So when whoever's wearing the talisman fails a saving throw, they can add a d4 to the roll and potentially turn it into a success. And you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and then it refreshes after a long rest. So no reaction needed. That is really, really good. Think about that. So a lot of people say that the Artificer ability, I forget, Ingenious something or other, where you use your reaction. I think it's a 7th level feature as well. Use your reaction to, add a die or gain advantage to a saving throw or something to that effect. I can't think of it right now. But that uses the reaction. This Protection of the Talisman is a really, really good invocation because you can add a d4 to a saving throw and it doesn't take any reaction at all. And saving throws are really where you want to use these boost abilities for. You can't use guidance on a saving throw, but you can use Bardic Inspiration, I think, on certain subclasses, and you can use this, and it doesn't take any action, reaction, or bonus action for you to use it. And saving throws is really, really one of the most important things that you want to boost and you want to ensure that you succeed on, especially at the mid to higher levels. This is where things will completely incapacitate you or take you out of a combat. Now, you have a potential to succeed if you fail one of those saving throws. That's super good. This Protection of the Talisman, if I pick Pact of the Talisman as my Pact boon, I am guaranteed to take this invocation because it is the best one available for that pact. The final invocation that you can take is Rebuke of the Talisman. There's no level requirement for this one. All you have to do is have the Pact of the Talisman feature for it. So basically what happens is whoever's wearing a talisman, if they're hit by an attacker that you can see within 30 feet of you, you then can use your reaction to deal psychic damage to the attacker. The damage is not a lot. It's equal to your proficiency bonus, but you also get to push the creature 10 feet away from the wearer of the talisman. So, a lot to unpack here. This one is good, but there's a lot of limitations here. So first of all, if you push someone 10 feet, that means usually it's their turn. They're attacking. So they let's say you're wearing the talisman. They move up to you. They attack you. You use this Rebuke. They move back 10 feet. Unless they've used up all their movement, they're just going to move right back onto you and attack you again. I mean, I would say that it's going to be a rare instance where you're going to use this push ability and the person can't get to you. Now, it works against attacks of opportunity, so there's that. You know, there's certain things that you can do with it, but they're very niche and very specific. Realistically, 90% of the time, you're going to use it, and the person's going to move right back and hit you again. Now, I know what you're thinking. You can use this on ranged attackers because all you have to do is see them. They don't have to be next to you or next to the wearer of the talisman. So as long as they're within 30 feet of you, if they're hitting you with a ranged attack, you can push them out of the way. So if there's an archer in a tree or something, they're shooting you with arrows. If they're within 30 feet of you, you can push them, which means they're going to fall off the tree or fall off a ledge. That can be handy, but again, very circumstantial. The chances that you are within 30 feet of a ranged attacker are fairly low. Generally, if someone's attacking you from range, they're a lot further away than 30 feet. Now, something that's good is there's no limit to how many times you can use it. So you can use it every single combat. The only thing is it does take up your reaction, but I like that there's no limit to how many times you can use it. So every time something hits you, you can push them back if you want. Now, it does take your reaction, which does suck. That's not great to use it for yourself, since an enemy can just hit you and then get pushed back by the Rebuke and then use 10 feet of movement to get right back to you. But if you combine it with certain things, like for example, Warlocks have access to the spell Summon Shadow Spawn, which, or Slow, the spell Slow, you can get access to that as well with some invocations. Those allow you to reduce enemies' movement, and that can save you from a second attack from an enemy, potentially. But you still have to take a hit to use it, which does kind of suck because you have to take the damage, right, in order to use the ability. And then you also have to use your reaction. So there is a cost to this, and that's why there's no level requirement to take this invocation, because the designers knew that this one, on paper, initially, on first glance, it looks really, really good. But when you really think about it and when you actually use it, you realize it's not as good as you initially thought it was going to be. I would say this one is still salvageable. There's some really good case uses for this. If you have zombie minions, you can use your zombies to try and grapple foes. They hit your zombie to, kill them so they can still get to you. They hit the zombie, then you push them back another 10 feet. Potentially, they're not going to get to you. They're either going to get grappled, or if they end up killing the zombie, they get pushed back and they don't have enough movement to get to you. That's something that's pretty useful. You can also give it to, if you use the spell Summon Shadow Spawn, which is fantastic. One of the versions of the Shadow Spawn that you can summon reduces the enemy movement if they start their turn next to the Shadow Spawn. That is great, because then when the enemy starts its turn next to the spawn, they hit the spawn. Now they get pushed back 10 feet. Their movement was already decreased, so that basically they have to move in and re-engage, and they have no other movement left. So you can really lock enemies down doing this type of strategy. So that's not too bad. It's not my favorite invocation. If I take a Pact of the Talisman, this is not an invocation that I'm going to take 100% of the time, unlike the protection of the Talisman, which I will be taking almost every single time. But overall, I think the invocation package for the Pact of the Talisman is pretty good. You get 2 really good invocations, or at least one really good one and one pretty good one, and then you get one that's, it's so-so. It's not terrible, but it's so-so. So overall, the Pact of the Talisman comes with some interesting and unique possibilities for the Warlock. I can agree that it's not the most powerful pact unless you have a very specific build. But if you think about it, Pact of the Blade doesn't either. And I know that the Hexblade benefits from the Pact of the Blade pretty well, but let's be honest, most players who play a Hexblade are either multi-classing or they're just dipping into Hexblade for 1 or 2 levels. I've never ever played at a table where someone is using a full single class Hexblade from level 1 to whatever. Most people that I play with that use a Hexblade, they're only using it to dip a couple levels. I've never seen someone using Hexblade also take Pact of the Blade because they never get to a high enough level to be doing that anyways. Now, if you're not a Hexblade, Pact of the Blade can be decent, but you have to pump so many resources into your character build in order to make it work. And even then, all you're doing is you're barely catching up to marshals in terms of damage output. So, and then you're not able to take the hit, so you can't even really be in melee for very long. You could use Eldritch Blast, but you're giving up a lot of potential invocations that would normally boost your Eldritch Blast just to boost the Pact of the Blade. Now, I know this video is not about Pact of the Blade, but I just want to compare because a lot of people hate the Pact of the Talisman, or they say that it's the worst one, when in reality, unless you're a Hexblade, I think Pact of the Blade is. But enough comparison. I'll get to Pact of the Blade in a separate video. I don't mean to compare the two in such a hard way. I just wanted to kind of clarify that Pact of the Talisman may not be as bad as you might think, and as some people might think. In my opinion, Pact of the Blade is actually the worst invocation. Then Pact of the Talisman is just above it, just slightly. But there are some really interesting things that you can do with Pact of the Talisman, as we discussed here before, especially if you pick a lot of the invocations that are available to you once you pick that pact. I'm sure I've missed some stuff that you can do with this one, so I would like to hear from you. What about you? What are some of the things that you like about Pact of the Talisman? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you have any other questions, also leave them down there in the comments down below. As always, I'm your innkeeper from the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime. I'll talk with you then.